And the one thing I could say about the flogger, a lot of people don't like it, the way you fish with it and stuff like that, but I can say that I probably learned more from using the flogger. I don't have to catch fish. I love watching people catch fish. And with the flogger, I learned a lot by looking at the fish. I've watched customers where they drop it on the bed and I'd be looking at them and I could see it clear as daylight. They can't even see the fish. I could see the bait, I could see it in front of them, I could see what they're doing with it, and I could tell all the little subtleties that would make that fish trigger. And I really learned some neat stuff as far as that went.
And again, to me, it looked like you were almost looking through like a road cone.
Yeah.
The thing looked like a road cone, you know, like an orange pylon, you know? And I'm like, what are they using over there? And of course, the guy I was with, he knew what it was. I didn't, because I've never done that. Anyhow, I just wanted to tell my story, my Marcel story. That was 18 years ago when I first met him, and then I started talking to him.
I can't believe time is going that fast.
And you know, and I talk to him every boat show. I see Marcel, and I talk to him about different equipment on boats and different boats, and you know, and he likes me because I run a Ranger, so you know, he's like, so anyhow, all right.
Well,
Marcel,
your story is you lost to Marcel and Dobson. I lost to Marcel's wife and his father.
Well, actually, yeah, that was the day after, I think. It may have been the day after on Kent Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of those.
Really?
I think that was the opener, and the next day, my wife fished with my dad, and they should have won the tournament, but my dad called the wrong fish.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
no.
kind of made a mistake. So,
I don't even remember all your
What do you
accolades
think?
anymore, Marcel, but for
Not
those
bad
of
for
you
my
that don't
first
know
one.
Marcel, he comes here about, try
Every
to
other
get him
year.
about every third year.
yeah, something like
And
that.
he's he used to make his living as a touring pro with FLW.
Both. I fished BASS, FLW for a good handful of years, BASS. I was fishing both of the majors at one time. Back then, it wasn't called the Elite Series. It was called, 100 years ago, it was the Bassmaster BP Top 100. Then it was the BP Top 150. Then it was called the Bassmaster Tour. And then it's the Elite Series. It's all the same, but that's the string of, you know, how they named it. And I don't even know whether it's still the Elite Series now. When I fished it, it was the last 2 years of when it was still the Tour. And then what they did was they gave out the invites for the Elite Series to all the tour guys, because that was just changing the name. But unfortunately, at that point, they went to, I think it was 10 tournaments, and it was like, I don't know, $5,000, 11 tournaments or something like that, $5,000 a piece. And, you know, I had to make a decision, you know, you could only, you know, it's $55,000 entry fees here. FLW at the time was 6 tournaments, $4,000 a piece, $24,000 there. And, you know, it just got to be too much running around, so I narrowed it down to FLW, and basically, you know, a couple years later, just kind of retired. I mean, you know, I had had enough. I mean, I love tour fishing, but it was tough. You know, you're on the road a lot and stuff like that. You have to have the financial resources to really do it. You have to be prepared to do that kind of stuff, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, I felt like as far as the fishing end of it, I was fine, but as far as the financial end of it, you know, I didn't have the backbone to keep me where I wanted to be. To keep up with those guys, you have to be 100% all in, or else, you know, they'll run circles around you. You know, if you're there worrying about what's going on at home, or if you're there and you got a job to come back to, forget it. These guys, the good ones, are there doing it 100% of the time. The only thing that they are doing outside of that is stuff for their sponsors, and that's pretty much it. So you got to be all in if you want to really succeed against these guys. They're good.
So now, Marcel works as a guide in the summertime.
I got
I'll sell you a boat in the wintertime, and pretty much be guiding on Lake St. Clair, or if you want to go up north, like Burt, Mullet, that area, the Indian River area.
I mean, the guiding thing has really gone really well. I mean, I got started, I mean, most of you know how I got started, but I got started back, you know, in the early 2000s, 2005 or something like that. And I worked for one of the other guides. I mean, honestly, we didn't, the way the other person did business and the way I wanted to do business just differed. So I went on my own and started it, and now, you know, I'm very fortunate. I got a team of about 5 or 6 other guides. I don't even know how many I got. It's growing all the time. But I've been hand selecting these guys. They've all got good personalities. good, very good fishermen, quality equipment. So, there's a lot of guys that wanted to be part of the team, but, you gotta sometimes pick and choose. I mean, just like you guys have a great club, you guys got a lot of good memories, you all stick together and stuff like that. Well, my team and I, we all stick together and, do a lot of things together. So it's pretty neat how it all goes.
How many guide trips did you do last year?
Me, I cut back, I think only about 110 or 20.
Okay.
I mean, I used to do 150, but I'm getting older. So,
I talked to Marcel on the phone, and he said, what is it you want me to come and talk about? And I said, well, I suck at cold water inland lake largemouth. Why don't you talk about that? But the truth is, he can talk about that, or he actually prefers to just answer questions too, most of the time. So if there's something you want to ask somebody that really knows their stuff.
I'll talk a little bit about, some pre-spawn largemouth, pre-spawn smallmouth and stuff like that, but I think, I love teaching people stuff, and I think, the best way to learn is for guys to ask questions on what they don't know in case there's something I bring up. Because there are a lot of basics that I'll talk about and stuff like that. As far as, just understanding what's going on out there. This time of the year, you guys are all gonna get out there, you're gonna get in your boats and, gonna say, hey, what's the water temperature and all that. And honestly, I don't even look at my water temperature much anymore. It's something, it's kind of good to know, but I already have an idea. I mean, the ice is off the lake tomorrow. If I go out there, that water temperature's gonna be in the high 30s or low 40, probably 37 to 42 right out of the gate without even getting out there. And from that point on, it's just a process of, knowing which baits to throw in. I mean, and when I go out there and pre-spawn fish, right out of the gate, number one bait, I've told you guys this before, but the first thing I'm gonna pick up is gonna be a blade bait right out of the gate. Anytime it's super, super cold, the blade bait is gonna be really, really good. Now this one I haven't changed the hooks on, but I will change these hooks. These are factory hooks, and I take them out, and I actually don't use split rings anymore. I actually use braid loops that I hold them on. What that does is it stops the hook from getting wedged. This hook gets wedged like this, and it lets it rotate around, so you're gonna lose a lot less fish with that. Kind of wish I would have brought one with you that I had tied, but I don't have my boat right now. It's all getting, ready for the season. But the blade bait is something that I would highly recommend to you guys. You're gonna say, well, what blade baits should I use? What size should I use? I'm not sponsored by these guys at all, just so you know. Silver Buddy. I think it's the best blade bait out there. There's a lot of them that look better, a lot of them that'll last longer, but it's not about that. It's about the action. This is very thin. This thin aluminum or whatever, this metal, whatever it is, it creates a really, really strong vibration in the water. My favorite size, I'm gonna get one size. Most of them are gonna be this 3/4 ounce right here. Gold or silver. I like the gold for the most part. I mean, I always tie on the gold first. I will throw a silver a little bit, especially if it's a little cloudy out or something like that, I'll throw the silver. But the gold is my number one go-to as far as the way you use it. Well, you're just gonna throw it out there, let it sink to the bottom. You like to be around sand a lot of the times. It gets to the bottom. Big mistake a lot of people make is they lift the rod way too high and stuff like that. Basically, you just want to lift the rod about a foot, get this bait to come up, wiggle up, and fall back down. They're going to usually, most of the times they'll hit it laying a lot of times when it's laying right on the bottom, believe it or not. I don't care if it's a piece of metal. It's laying there like this, they come and grab it. And you'll know it. And if you guys get these things, I mean, you're going to definitely going to catch more fish in the cold. So that's going to be my number one bait that I'm going to throw. Now, if the water's a little dingy or something like that, that gets a little bit tough as far as that goes, but clear water, that's what I'm going to use. I'll also play around when it's super cold with some hair jigs like this. This is a little fighter bug here. This is one a buddy just made up for me. I like this little black one. A little trick, a lot of people have trouble casting it, but what I do is I cut off a little piece of plastic and I just hook it on there. That little piece of plastic is going to give you a little bit more extra weight as far as making a longer cast. I'm going to throw this thing on fairly light line, somewhere in that 6-8 pound range, and you're going to try to make long casts, throw it out there, and it's going to be just a slow, steady retrieve back, and you're just going to let it kind of swim it back. I work over in Lansing, and we have the Grand River that butts up to the marina there, and every year one of the guys I work with, he and I sneak out there, and he actually turned me onto it. But his name's Josh Kraft, and his nickname is the Hair Jig Kid on Instagram or whatever. And he's got, he makes a lot of his own hair jigs, and we go back there and right along the seawall in the Grand River, you just throw up along the seawall and just bring it back, and we'll catch, every year a couple of really nice smallies off of there. I mean, once it gets, a little bit sunnier out and the water gets, a little clearer, we'll catch fish every time we go out there. And that's a good way to catch fish. So now, you're talking about the first two baits. It's going to be that, blade bait. It's going to be the hair jig. And then as it gets a little bit warmer, I'm going to start changing things up a little bit. You're going to start to see me throw a jerk bait. This one here's a mega bass. This Strike King one, I mean, they run a little bit different. I mean, this one's a Pro Blue Edo 110. It's a super good cold water bait, and this is something that I like a lot. Once the water warms up a little bit in the pre-spawn, I'll go to something that's going to have a little bit more action, like the Strike King jerk bait. I always stick with the natural colors to start right out of the gate. The one thing about your jerk bait fishing, this time of the year, I'm going to do something that's going to cause the bait to pause a lot. You don't want to work your jerk bait fast. On Lake St. Clair, this jerk bait right here will catch me a lot of fish. It's something that's going to go down 5-6 feet. It's a Lucky Craft Stacy, and it's a super good jerk bait for this time of the year out there. It gets down a little bit more, and my cadence is pretty much going to be, I'll just take the rod, jerk it twice, and I'll let it sit for a while. Jerk it once, let it sit for a while, maybe 3 times. The main thing with smallmouth fishing to me is anytime I'm using a hard bait, I'm going to always use an irregular cadence. Otherwise, nothing I do is going to be the same. It's never pop, pop, stop, pop, pop, stop. That's what every other person's doing. Most people do that. That's just out of habit. I like something irregular because I want them to just be confused. I want them to be ready when it's time to bite, something to trigger them that's, they see that 1-2 stop, they're on it, 1-2, they're on it. But when it starts, you pop it 2 times and then we'll stop and really give it a quick snap, all of a sudden, that may trigger that extra strike. So I like to tease them a little bit, throw something a little bit different at them. But the pauses are the key early in the year. Whether this is largemouth or smallmouth. I call it, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I don't smoke, but I just say, hey, I'm going to light a cigarette. Throw that out there, give it 2 jerks, and it's like lighting one up, put it down, 1 pop, just let it sit. Most of the times, when it's super cold, in the 40s, in that 40 to 50 degree range, they're going to hit it on that long pause. And you'll see a lot of that on Lake St. Clair. So that jerk bait will be really good. Again, at that same time of the year, now I'm starting to move in with some of my plastic baits. I start getting into the upper 40s, low 50s. I'm gonna be starting to throw that tube out there. Again, working it slow, really dragging it really slow. And of course, the swim bait is always good all year long. But the swim bait will come into play. I just put this head on it, but I don't really like this hook. It's a little bit too bulky, the hook. I like a little thinner gauge wire hook. I just didn't have any, but I brought this just to show you what I'm really targeting out there. But the swim bait, again, is awesome. I mean, I'm pretty much going to slow roll the swim bait, throw it out there, let it get to the bottom, go over the rocks, and I'm just going to work it really slow, just trickling over the rocks, waiting to make a little bit of contact out there.
And on a bait caster or a spinning rod, Marcel?
Yeah, I throw it on religiously on a bait caster. Now, if I were downsizing to a really small swim bait or something like that, would I throw it on a spinning rod? There's a good chance. But primarily, the blade bait, you could throw on either one. I throw that on a bait caster. A lot of guys throw it on a spinning rod. The hair jigs, I'm going to throw that on a spinning rod for sure. Something with a pretty decent amount of action, pretty long rod. The ideal thing is to make long casts. Long casts are critical, just about on, most of the smallmouth fishing. Tubes, most guys are throwing it on a spinning rod. I'm throwing it always on a bait caster. I just like throwing a bait. I like setting the hook on a bait caster. That's going to be always on a bait caster unless I'm throwing a smaller one. And jerk baits are always, actually jerk baits could be either or also. If it's really windy out, and really nasty, which it could be this time of the year during pre-spawn, that jerk bait pattern, spinning rod is gonna work really good because, even the best get backlash is when it's super, super windy. And there are times when you wanna throw it into that wind to, to get to a certain spot. So you can gun it through with a spinning rod a little better at times. Then, once we get into the upper 40s and in the mid to mid 50s, I'm going to start to go cranking a little bit more. I'm going to make some contact. These are a couple of Strike King crankbaits. These things go down 8 feet, 8, 10 feet. I like these square bills. I love these crankbaits right here, especially this one here early in the year. Something a little bit of brown back and a little orange belly. But any of those browns and greens, sometimes there's some olive ones. They're really, really good, but these are probably a couple of my favorite crankbaits. The Rapala makes the DT, DT6 and a couple of in the DT10, and they're all good crankbaits too. I'm sponsored by Strike King, but I don't ever badmouth any of the other companies. A lot of the companies make a lot of good baits, but these are definitely baits Strike King baits that I use. I got a pile of them. I love these things. Then once you get, once you're over 50 degrees and you're in that 50 to 60 mark, then all of a sudden I'm going to come in and play around a lot with my with lipless crankbaits. I love throwing a lipless crankbait. It's really awesome. Any of your reds are going to work at times. Any of your golds are going to work. Another great color is going to be blue chrome. Everybody should have a blue chrome one in their box, honestly. It's a great bait. 55, I would say, is your optimum temperature to throw in this bait. As far as the retrieve of the bait, whenever you start throwing that lipless crankbait and it's like high 40s to low 50 degrees, the water temperature, what I like to do at that point is yo-yoing the bait. That's my favorite way. It's almost like I'm fishing the blade bait, but only on a crankbait style bait. The lipless crankbait, I'll throw it out there, make a long cast, I'll let it get to the bottom, and I'll just pick it up and do a continuous retrieve. Stop it, just pick it up, and it's doing the same thing, coming up like a dying bait fishing, just coming up, falling back down. They'll hit the daylights out of that. Once I get to that 55 mark, then all of a sudden things change. I'm going to start to do a good, steady, slow retrieve. I'm going to make contact if I can, keep it near the bottom a little bit, but I'm going to do a little bit slower, steady retrieve. And of course, once you get into, the warmer time of the year, you're going to do throw that thing out there, and you're going to just crank it away at it. So the key to pre-spawn is going to be slow. Fish it slow, and most of the times you're going to trigger a lot more strikes. Guys get out there, it's the beginning of the year. The first mistake they make is just fishing a little bit too fast, and the fish are lethargic. They're not used to that. Once that water temperature warms up, you start getting into high 50s and stuff like that. That's when things are going to start to change. So that's pretty much, they're the main primary baits, whether it's largemouth or smallmouth. If I am fishing strictly for largemouth, the one bait I did not bring in here, but I would be throwing a lot, would also be a jig and pig. I love throwing a jig and pig. That's something that I would definitely be throwing for, those pre-spawn fish when it's colder. It's using something, that you can work slow. You're not going to try to work that jig really quick. In the summertime, you would actually swim a jig. You do all kinds of things, but you're going to fish a lot quicker in the summer. But again, this time of the year, fish slow. You guys are going to the hot ponds. That's something, of course, the water in there is warmer. We know those fish are going to be more aggressive, but it's still the time of the year. It's still that time of the year, the cold time of the year. Fish are still going to be pre-spawn fish, only in warmer water. I think even in there, I think slowing down is going to help, especially if you get away from that warmer water a little bit. So, and that's what I wanted.
Marcel, I have a question. One of the challenges we were having with Lake St. Clair, I noticed, I remember going out on Lake St. Clair 15 years ago, and there'd be nobody during the week. And now because, Bassmaster and internet, literally last year, there was 200-300 boats along all the mile roads. The fish are just getting beat the crap out of. What do you do? Do you just go, is it just like, I gotta find fish somewhere else, I just gotta get out of this crowd?
I look for the crowd and then I go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you know, when you see the crowds, you're on the very, you know, you're on the hot end of the pre-spawn, and it's gonna be the spawn. You're starting to see that, you're gonna see that at the very end of April.
Yeah.
You're gonna get the good pre-spawn bite, it's gonna be, you know, all those fish are gonna be active, but everybody couldn't wait to get out there, so they're gonna be pounding all the same stuff, but they'll
Yeah.
be a little bit more spread out. Once they start bedding, that's what everybody's gonna get really, really tight out there. And me personally, I do try to stay away from the crowds. If there's 20 boats working one area, I just kind of laugh, because I'll just go outside the box a little bit, and I'll go about, you know, 80 yards away, and I'll circle around, and I'll, you know, I'll have it all to myself. These guys are just trying to, what they do is, I mean, they're just going around in circles, catching the same fish over and over again, and, you know, half of them don't even know that they're doing that. That's all it is. You catch a smallmouth, there's a bed there, you put it back in the bed. Well, the other guy, you come behind me, and in 10 minutes, you're gonna catch that same fish, and then, you know, these guys are gonna all catch that fish, and that's why they look like they do. They're all torn apart. I try to get away from there a little bit. I'll go in one direction or another. You know, most guys, they're gonna go there to any of the blue wall areas. They're gonna be between Memorial Park
Yeah, they're just
and 9 Mile.
pounding.
You know, and that's where most guys are gonna be. I get away from there. If you go across the lake, there's a lot of reeds up you know, up on the north side of the lake there. There's gonna be a lot more reeds. You can catch a lot of smallies in there, bedding.
Are you talking near the north of the North Channels then?
Not north of the North Channel, but up in that general area, and all the way, you know, anywhere up in that whole outside of Muscatmoot and all that stuff.
Muscatmoot.
But Muscatmoot used to only have 4 or 5 boats in there every day. Now there's, you know, 25 boats
Yeah.
in there every day. And it's different. Pressure is a part of the game anymore. You know, I did a little talk the other day over at Schultz's Outfitters, and one of the things I brought up is that, you know, bass fishing is changing. It's changing because of technology, because of social media. Everything's plastered all over the place. So it's easier to find fish than it's ever been before with all these electronics and all these tools. Social media is telling you where everybody's going to be, and that's a dead giveaway. But what it's going to come down to is going to come down to execution. What guys can execute the best. A lot of the trends in bass fishing are generated not here, but over in Japan, where those lakes are pressure to no end. Well, all these techniques, all this modern technology stuff as far as fishing baits and stuff like that, start over there, because that's, you know, they're just ahead of us in the, you know, in the way we fish anymore. So if you want to, you know, get ahead of things, figure out how to execute more than anything. You're going to be able to find the fish. If all those boats are going around all these fish, you got to figure out a way to get that fish to bite a little faster than everybody else. What will it take? Could be lighter line. You know, that could be, I do believe lighter line is going to be a big part of it down the road. It could be a larger or smaller profile bait, a different profile bait than everybody's throwing. If everybody's throwing a, you know, 3-inch Ned rig, well, you may have to have something that's just a hair different, you know. Some colors maybe outside the box a little bit. I just believe a lot of those fish are profile driven, that time of the year that you're talking about a little bit late after pre-spawn.
Yeah.
They're going to be profile driven a lot of times, you know. I'll have multiple baits. I'm going to have a tube on one rod. I'm going to have a straight tail worm on another rod, and I'll have a do-nothing kind of like a baby Senko type, you know, bait on another rod. So I'm going to show them a little bit of, you know, different things as far as that goes. But it's understanding the fish. You know, who brought up the flog? You brought up the flogger? Who brought up the flogger earlier?
Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the flogger is what taught me a lot about all these things that, you know, I'm talking about. You know, what I watched, you know, not to get off the pre-spawn thing. I mean, I covered my baits there, but just getting into the spawn, which you're going to get into it just as fast. Those fish during the spawn, you got to really figure them out, and to get them to bite quicker. I see a lot of guys make a lot of mistakes out there, drop shotting. That's when I start drop shotting during the spawn, even though I don't want to target spawning fish, but it's a part of my job. And a big mistake that a lot of guys make, and you guys got to really get on this. I mean, I can't tell you how important this is. On a drop shot, your tag line, which is between your bait and your weight, it's critical to have a very short tag line, like that short. Okay. When you're using a bait fish style bait in the summer, bait fish are going to be up off the bottom. a lot of times, a lot of your baits are gonna be just above the sand grass out there, but why do you want your line this, this far off the bottom? Because the bass that you're fishing for, they're not eating, they're protecting, and that's what you gotta understand. They're not there to eat, they're there to protect, they're protecting a bed. So if this is the bass, and the bait's here, and the bed's there, this bait is not doing anything to that bed. But if you put the bait from here down, it becomes a threat. It becomes a threat to the bed. So that's why you get them to bite. I look for two things. If I see a fish on a bed, two things I look for are, do they not like it in the bed, like on the bottom, or do they not like it just at eye level? And that's going to tell me whether I want to throw a tube or a drop shot. And you'll really notice, if you really pay attention, that some fish, you'll go through an hour and most of them want it one way or the other. It's just really weird. But when they get a little, tough to figure out, it's the first thing I want to figure out. Then from there, I'm going to figure out, what is it, what part of that bed is the key little spot on it, because every bed, if you have a bed that's this wide, there's usually one little piece of that bed where they don't like it. It's the spot where they trigger. So I'll make multiple casts across the bed, trying to just dissect it and figure out where the sweet spot is. You'll notice the fish, you'll come across one side of the bed, and the fish won't even come over there, and he'll just sit there. You come across the other side, and you hit one point, and all of a sudden he's going to be there, and he's going to be looking at it. He may not hit it, but now you found where the spot that's pissing him off. So now he's mad. Now you just got to come, figure out, hey, does he not like, does he not want the tube? Does he want, what type of profile does he want? And then when all else fails, I start off with natural colors if I can, but a lot of times I'm going to go to something very bold and bright at that time, like a bubble gum or a siren color, which is chartreuse, worm or bait of that kind. A lot of times they're easy to see too. But I don't know if I got off the subject or not, but we were rolling. Yeah.
Earlier, when you were talking about Japanese baits and lighter line and smaller baits, to me, you were kind of describing BFS, the bait casting finesse systems.
Well, it's not. It may turn, it may turn into a finesse type of thing. But sometimes it's not just going to be just finesse. You know what else triggers fish? Bigger baits also. That's something else that will really stimulate. It's got to be something outside the box. You have to figure out how to execute. If everybody, okay, we got 20 guys here. If 16 guys are all throwing the same sort of baits, the same 3.5-inch tube, the same drop shot bait and all that stuff, and then one guy's going at, one after another is going by these fish, they're seeing the same thing over and over, but there's maybe 4 guys that they're doing something a little bit different. And you wonder, guys always wonder, man, how come the same guys catch all the fish all the time? Because they're doing something that everybody else is not doing. And you got to kind of, get on that trend a little bit. And I think it's going to come down to that. I think fishing pressure is really going to push the fish into the mode where they get educated. Don't think they don't, because a lot of times a new bait will come along and all of a sudden they are on that new bait. When a Senko first came out, I remember years ago, I didn't even live in Michigan, but a kid who was never that great of a fisherman, he was a good fisherman, but he wasn't the top fisherman. He got a hold of Senkos before anybody else, and he turned into a great fisherman out of nowhere. And I asked him, his name was Patrick, and I asked him, Pat, what are you doing? And he threw me a couple of Senkos, and I had him in my boat, and I didn't even try him. And like, these things are stupid. Well, that was way back then. And then it was like the following year, I was like, man, let me try that. And then a kid got in the back of my boat, a co-angler, and he started throwing it, and I'm throwing a jig and pig, and I'm up at Thousand Islands, and I'm going around a clump of milfoil, and I'm flipping that jig, and I'm catching a fish here and there. He's smoking them. I was like, that was it. I knew. I was like, man, I'm making some mistakes here. So then I got on that, and that was the end of that. But that trend came. Now, Senkos still work great. That's a phenomenal bait. There's no doubt they do. But they don't work like they did then. Mm-hmm. Now there's other things that you see. Back then, at that time, drop shot, drop shotting was not even legal in Michigan. You know, I don't think it even became legal until like 2005 or 6 or something like that. So, you know, times change, and you got to really adapt to change.
Do you think that's why they eat the fuzzy dice so much?
You know, it's funny, you know, when you say that.
They just don't know what it is?
You know, that's a funny question, because a lot of guys ask, what does it represent, and this and that, and I don't know, do you guys all know what he's talking about, a fuzzy dice? Okay. I've thrown it, you know, a bunch, and I've had days where it was fantastic, and some days it doesn't work at all. It's one of them funny baits, but again, that's something that came new, came from overseas, guys started throwing that, and all of a sudden, it's like the new thing, you know, and I think it will be good for a while, but I think just as fast, it's going to be a fad or a phase of the next best, until the next best thing comes. But there's more and more stuff like that coming out all the time.
Do you think that like the crankbait bites kind of went away, not went away on St. Clair, but people just quit throwing it because they chase them around with a minnow or the dice or whatever?
That's
Do you
exactly
think,
that's
do you think
exactly
the
what's
industry
happening.
do you think it'll revolve? Where like baits that used to
I'll
catch
let
it
you
were
know
gonna
at the
come
end
in?
of this year. You know, it's so funny, because I have 1 million crankbaits. I love throwing a crankbait. It's been so successful in years past, but a lot of guys have gotten away from it because of forward-facing sonar, where guys are throwing minnow-style baits, where, you know, you could pretty much get the bait into the strike zone a lot more easily than you can a crankbait, you know, as far as moving it into that, you know, the spot you want to get it into. And you know, I do feel crankbaits are taking, you know, a back seat to minnow-style baits right now, because you're not seeing them thrown on tour nearly as much. If you watch, you know, I don't even watch a lot of fishing, but everything I watch, everybody's heads down, and they're all gunning out, you know, minnow-style baits or drop shots.
Sonar minnows.
I think it's because, like, do you think it's because they can hunt one specific fish now instead of a group?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. They could, first of all, you know, the guys that are really good, they could tell the size of the fish, you know, fairly accurately. They could see that. They're fishing for more solo fish. They know exactly, you know, they're ready for a fish. They're not casting blind and then seeing a fish and reeling over to it. They're waiting because that fish is there for a split second. You know it's there, and you got to know how to cast to 40 feet. You got to know how to throw to 60 feet one way or another, and do it in a hurry and get it in front of that fish. I mean, fish are moving. I mean, it's not that easy, but that's why you're seeing bigger bags of fish, bigger fish caught than ever before. There's no doubt you're going to see bigger, more. There's always been a decent amount of big fish out there, but they're all going to be exposed because deep water fishing has become, you know, a lot more easily, you know, it's more easily accessed, and you're able to find fish deeper a lot more easy than ever before. There's no doubt about it. You have side scan, you go over 20 feet of water, 30 feet of water. Lake St. Clair, you go right down the middle of the lake, and you can see out at 80, 100 feet that way, 80, 100 feet that way. You see one little piece of wood or something over there, boom, you've got a waypoint. Turn the boat around, you got forward-facing sonar. You see that there's 3 fish holding on it, boom, you're making a cast. It's that simple. 10 years ago, nope, you didn't even do that kind of stuff. Now it was just, you know, you have a cone that's showing you 1/3. You know, basically, if you're in 21 feet of water, you got about a 7-foot cone down there. It's about 1/3 of the depth. All of a sudden, you know what's down there, right underneath the boat, but you have no idea what's right over there, a little ways, one way or another. Now you can see all that stuff. So it's becoming, you know, technology-driven, no doubt about it. We got a lot of pressure, like we were talking about earlier. Pressure is affecting fishing big time. If you want to become a better fisherman, I think you need to really do, you know, understand how to finesse fish some. I mean, you see a lot of the big power fishermen, there are a lot of the guys that retired from the tour. These guys were all, you know, guys that threw crankbaits and jigs and spinner baits and all that stuff. Well, I mean, a lot of that stuff is starting to phase out, you know. I mean, there's still moving baits like that are going to be used for a while, especially because some of these guys are fishing dingy water. And, you know, if you're in Santee Cooper and you're fishing a bunch of cypress trees, you know, you're not going to, forward facing isn't going to work all the time. So there's some places where it's going to not change as quickly. Open water fishing, Michigan, it's going to change fairly quickly.
So Marcel, let's say you're out on Lake St. Clair in the next couple of weeks. It's 40 degrees, 42 degrees, whatever. And it's muddy. And you got to catch fish. You know, they're pre-spawn or whatever. What would you be using those baits you told us about?
Yes. But the only thing is I'm going to know exactly what I'm throwing at. Otherwise, I'm going to look for a specific rock pile, specific piece of wood. Could be a wreck of sorts. But it's gonna be an area where I know there's some boulders, rock piles, wood, of that nature. So now I already eliminated all the open water, because I'm not looking for open water grass fish or any of that stuff. So I'm gonna go to a high percentage place, could be a point or a seawall or something like that. And then I'm gonna go there and pretty much, even in the muddy water, you can get them on a crankbait. You know what I mean? If you use chartreuse color crankbait, the vibration will trigger the strike.
I used to use a
But-
DD-22 20 years
Yep.
ago.
Yep. I won't throw the jerk bait and that kind of stuff as much, but I will definitely throw a tube in there for sure. I'll throw the blade bait around there for sure, but it's stuff like that. I'm gonna throw that tube around and just, bring it through the tighter areas. The fish, they hone in on that stuff pretty good, but you gotta know that the fish are there.
Right.
And with forward-facing sonar, it's a dead giveaway now, you know the fish are there. I mean, your bait's gonna be, within a foot or two of the bait, the fish, and they'll pick up on it. Swim bait, I may even upsize, I'd use a little bit bigger, I'd use just a little bit bigger swim bait than that. Just reel it nice and slow, and they'll pick right up on it.
How do you decide what color tubes to throw?
I gotta laugh at this one. The reason why is because it's a standing joke with me and a bunch of guys. But I throw green pumpkin, and then I throw green pumpkin, and then I throw green pumpkin.
Yeah, watermelon seed. You gave up on the watermelon?
No, I mean, I have watermelon, but, I throw a tube a lot, especially if I'm up north and I'm trophy fishing. I love throwing a tube. It's probably my favorite thing to throw. And I'm gonna order tubes for this season. And when I put in an order to Strike King, I'm gonna order 48 bags of green pumpkin and nothing else. So guys can buy all the colors they want, and they can tell you about their flake and this and that. And there are times when water is clear where I do like watermelon. And a lot of times on your tubes and stuff like that, I don't go crazy about all the funny stuff, but when the water's crystal clear, sometimes a little bit of a flake will definitely help. And to me, no matter what I'm using, whether it's a crankbait, tube, or whatever, my secondary color, as in there's the natural color, and then there's like the back or whatever, is purple. I like purple. Crankbait with a purple kind of back on it, almost like, this is blue, but something that's just a little bit more purple, like something like that. But I'm gonna throw, my tube is gonna have, watermelon with a purple flake or something like that. But primarily, when I any more with tubes, if they're gonna eat a tube, they're gonna eat a green pumpkin tube. I promise you. There's no doubt about it. I've come upon lots of big crawfish up north, and I look down in there, and I just can't believe how much they look like a green pumpkin tube. Once I see them down there, like, man, no wonder they eat this thing all the time up here, especially the big fish. So tubes, it's gonna be a green pumpkin. And unless you're on a bed and you wanna see the tube, that's the only other time I throw a different color, and that's gonna be some funky tube like white, bubble gum, or like a yellow, some sort.
Marcel, you said when you're up north, Burt and Mullet's your favorite, but if you had to pick other lakes to fish up there, what would be some of the lakes up that way? Up north?
Well, right now, when I say that, they've been my favorites, but lately they've been super tough. I mean, just the fishing is not as good as it used to be, flat out. I love Charlevoix, I love Traverse Bay, I love some of the little lakes around there. I really loved Grand until they had a fish kill a few years back, but it's coming back now. I like Long Lake over there and Alpena too a lot. I mean, I like those two lakes a real lot. I mean, I've always liked Burt and Mullet. Charlevoix. Walloon can be fun. It's not my favorite, but I will stop in there every once in a while. It's fun because there are a lot of fish there. You will get your string pulled there. Any of those lakes up there, I like them all actually. I may head out to Beaver Island a couple of times this year, and it's a long haul, but I'll go out there, and that's fun fishing out there too. Got to have the right conditions, so make sure you're with somebody. As far as another boat, it's always nice. But Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, all that stuff, any of the bays and stuff like that. I'm starting to like to get off the beaten trail a little bit and expand into that big water now that we have electronics that let you see everything out there.
How about some of the drowned river mountains on the west side of the state, Muskegon and White?
I don't get a chance to get over there that much.
I know they have a lot of fishing.
Yeah. You know, all the fishing I do and all the guide trips I booked, my biggest problem is I don't get enough time to fish, like enough fun stuff for myself, and that's the kind of stuff I want to target, you know? I mean, once you're a fishing guide, it becomes a job, and I love my job, but it prevents you from doing some of the other stuff. I mean, after you fish 6 days a week, it's not that you don't want to go fishing the 7th day, but your body doesn't want to go fishing on that 7th day.
Ever tried that Tawas Bay area at all?
Not really. I mean, I fished a little bit of Lake Huron stuff, but not a ton. Not a ton. I did pretty well when I did fish it a little bit. And I like the upper part, you know, all the way up to West Sheboygan too, up in that area a little bit too. Duncan Bay in there could be really fun at times, but that's such a hit or miss. I mean, the first time I went there, I caught a giant out of there, had a 6-pounder the first time I went there. You know, I went there another time and I could see the whole bottom. There was not a fish in there as far as the bass. They don't always reside there. They come in there at certain times of the year and, you know, then they're back out and stuff like that. But it was fun.
I know that part of the equation.
Yeah, no, you know, there are times when you don't even need your sonar or any electronics. You just look, there's no fish here. It is what it is. But
You ever had any experience around the Holiday Beach area and Power Point on the Canadian side there in Lake Erie?
in Erie?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, okay, let me backtrack. I moved to Michigan in 2004. When I first moved here, I didn't even know anything about Lake St. Clair. The first place I ever learned was the North Shore of Lake Erie. So I fished all the North Shore, and I loved fishing the North Shore. Biggest thing is, I do guide trips on Lake St. Clair now. I don't get to go over there as much because it's tough. Weather dictates too much over there. And I can always get out of the wind on Lake St. Clair, but over there, it's tough. You get any kind of a south wind or something like that, your day's ruined. South wind, any kind of wind on Lake St. Clair, I could hide somewhere. So back to that, I fish there all the time. In a lot of those places, I love fishing over there, and I still do. I just wish I could get over there more. But it's really good fishing. Now, I don't know how it is in the last few years. I mean, I hear different stories. I hear it's been good. I hear it's not as good as it used to be. So I can't really give you an honest, opinion myself right now. But
I've been trying to find some areas that I wanted to concentrate on this year. I've never really fished with many years.
Yeah.
I fished like Colchester area, Wilmington,
Yep.
around there, Bass Island. But I've never really, and it's close by there. I just wondered how it really was there, where you should really concentrate on.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good all through that area there, I mean, that you're talking about. I mean, that whole North Shore is good. I mean, you just gotta find the little subtleties, the little ridges and little high spots and stuff like that, any place where the structure changes a little bit. That's all it is. I mean, smallmouth fishing, when you're, any kind of bass fishing, not just smallmouth fishing, but it all comes down to, finding irregularities in the terrain within the, in the lake. You see a straight shoreline, not shoreline, but you see an underwater ridge or something like that, and it's straight. Well, as soon as it cuts one way or the other, cuts in or out, that's going to be your primary spot because it's just a funnel from deep water to shallow water. That's what they're going to
You
be.
never hear anybody talking about it like in the pre-spawn or spawning area. Like the 9 Mile area, everybody humps down over there. Everybody, you see everybody and their uncle there, but nobody ever really, hardly ever see any boats around that North Shore.
Yeah, that's
in that area.
Yeah, but that's because it's illegal.
Well, I mean, Well,
We're not bass fishing.
Do you know who's going to be here at the next meeting? The DNR. Now, first of all, he's right. A lot of guys do still fishing. I don't do it because it's my job and I'm a charter captain, and that would bring bad things to social media and the whole world. So that for me, it would be a no. Do people do it? Yes. I mean, it is where it is. They're going fishing. But that area should be, now I've never done it, but it should be phenomenal that time of the year, especially around a lot of those, nice little rocky areas. It should be like the mile roads, only with no boats.
That's what we want, the mile road with no
That's what we're
boats.
looking for.
Just trying to
You
think
guys said-
outside the
We want to get
box.
the ice guys to keep all the people from Indiana and Ohio coming in here.
I would take all your bass boats and all your bass rigs, and I'd go there, have a tournament out there on the Canadian North Shore, and just tell them it's a walleye tournament.
Yeah.
And put one of those in your live well, catch them all.
Yep. Yeah, but no, that, honestly, that should be great fishing.
What about barometric pressure and that before storms and that, they say when it's dropping, it's a good time.
Yeah.
And then the moon, but then that probably doesn't affect only bigger lakes because of the tide.
Yeah, I mean,
When to go in the morning at night.
there's no doubt the barometric pressure does have impact on the bite. I mean, there's no doubt, you see weather, you see a storm moving in, and they definitely fire up.
It's their bladder or
before that.
something
Yeah.
that rises and makes more active.
They become very, very active. I mean, even as a kid, I remember largemouth fishing, and I walk around the lake with my buddy, and we couldn't wait when a thunderstorm was due to come in, because, we'd be ready to run to the truck, but we were just fishing. We didn't even have boats to fish this lake, and we were like, oh my God, they're biting like crazy. Well, they definitely feed up, there's no doubt, I've seen it, I ran into a storm one time on Lake St. Clair. I was with clients, we were whacking the daylights out of them, boom, this big thunderstorm's rolling up, but I thought it was gonna kind of go by me. Well, thought it was the
We've been there before too.
So I made a dumb move. I ran the wrong way.
Oh.
I ran out into the lake more, and well, the storm hit me. I mean, it was about as bad as it could possibly get. It was one of those ones where, it's only blowing 5 miles an hour all day, lake's calm and all that. But when a storm came through, it was like them 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts. But it wasn't long, but it was enough that when it blew, it was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. You're just ducking down there. I mean, this lightning's blasting all over. As soon as it went by, I ran back to the fishing spot. The first 2 casts, we had 2 big fish, and then all of a sudden it just shut off.
Oh.
It was like, wow, that was pretty crazy. They bit right after the storm for like 5 minutes, and then it was like pulling teeth after that. So, weather impacts fishing, there's no doubt about it. There's, especially up north, for me, when I'm on the smallmouth end of it, that's where smallmouth and largemouth really differ a lot. I love sun when I'm smallmouth fishing. Largemouth fishing, it's a lot different. You know what I mean? They like different conditions. They bite good in the sun, but then they're going to be under docks. Good place to be when the sun's out, Lake Norman. That's a good dock lake, I can tell you that.
A lot of docks,
Yep.
millions of docks.
A lot of tournaments are won on docks there.
What about Fletcher's Pond?
I kind of want to be respectful of Marcel's time. Can we take like one more question and call that cool? Normally I ask our speakers to speak for 20 minutes, and
Yeah.
we've had him up there for an hour.
Oh, I don't care, I'll talk forever. You already know that part. You did have a question, and I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, so like Lake St. Clair, they call it like Okeechobee to the north, right? There's no real true contours.
Yeah.
Do you find that everyone says those fish are always constantly on the move? Like if you find them on one rock pile there today, tomorrow they're not going to be there. Do you find that there's certain rock piles fish relate to every year? Do you think they're the same fish?
There are some spots that fish, really don't move off of that much. I mean, they'll concentrate there, and they won't really move out of there a whole lot. And I mean, there's certain rock piles there that every 2 months in a row there'll be fish there every day. There's no doubt about it. There's some of those out there. I mean, do they move around the lake a lot? There's no doubt. Especially, there's certain times they get in that open water. Think about it. I mean, the main thing is it's going to be all about food.
Yep.
That's the whole thing. It's all about food. Are they feeding on crawfish? Are they feeding on mayflies? Are they feeding on spot-tail minnows? Are they feeding on some kind of shad? That's going to dictate where they're going to be on the water column. Down on the bottom, rocky area, late fall, they're going to get right in those rocks a lot of times. They'll be eating up on crawfish at the end of the year. They'll be down deep on spot tails. They'll be covering open water on threadfin or some small shad and stuff like that. Mayfly hatch comes, you better be around the mayflies. I mean, you got to get your little fuzzy dice out there. It's all relevant to what they're chowing down on. Any other good questions? I don't know. I can tie him up if you guys want me to put him in the closet for a minute.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Marcel.